Hey everybody, now that we've looked at the macro models, let's look at some micro models. We've looked at how to design a curriculum. Now let's move down and look at how to design a specific lesson. Just thinking about your particular task for this module, I think it'd be good if you looked at both a macro and a micro model. So if you picked a macro model like 80 or Assure or whatever, and set out your goals, decide learning outcomes and things like that, and then for each web page, lesson page, whatever, to pick a specific micro model that we'll discuss here. But it's up to you really, however you feel like it. Just to say, the macro models are as important as the micro models. Some people get het up or excited about the micro models because it tells you exactly how to design a lesson. There is no correct way to design a lesson. You need to know your class, and then you will know what suits them. But these are good guidelines, I think. So for me, the best, or one of the best approaches is Robert Gagne's 9 Events of Instruction. Gagne was born in 1916 and died in 2002 in Massachusetts. He's best known for his concept of conditions of learning, and he would have been a big advocate of applying instructional design theory to computer-based learning. So he has a 9-stage model of how you should deliver a lesson. And we'll cover each of the stages. So the first stage, Gagne says, is gain the attention of the learner. So it could be just shout hello there. If it's an online context, it could be to have a splash page, an exciting, alluring homepage. It could be, I don't know, to start off with a news item or something that's exciting, that's new, that's going on at the moment, but something to attract the learner's attention. Then inform them of the learner of the objective. So just say, in this lesson, we're going to cover A, B, C, D. Stimulate the recall of prior learning in terms of associating what they're doing now with something they already know. And those for me are the first 3 stages are setting the student up for success in terms of learning. The next 3 stages are teaching them the content. So present the information to them, give them guidance in terms of how to learn, how to understand, and then elicit performance in terms of asking them, do they understand, and assessing them in some way. The last 3 stages then are about enhancing or enriching their understanding by providing feedback, by assessing their performance at the time, and then even checking later on, ensuring that they retain the information in the long term as well. So a bit of detail there to gain the attention. Curiosity definitely motivates the student. So ask them something or talk about a news event or something like that. Outline the objectives, and I think it's always a good idea to outline the objectives of a lesson. Inform them how the current information relates to previous information. Present the content. Provide them help by giving them examples or examples of things that are non-examples, so they look like it's to do with it, but not. Case studies, maybe graphical representations, mnemonics, analogies, acoustics, stuff like that. Ask them to do something, elicit performance, and give them an opportunity to reinforce what they know, but also for you to check, do they correctly understand what's being taught? Then provide feedback and give them guidance in terms of how they're answering and what they're answering. That'd be generally, we might consider formative feedback, and then give them a bit of a summative assessment. And then Gagne means this to mean 6 months later, a year later, make sure that they're able to remember that and use it properly. And there's some verbs that might be associated with each of the stages, and a bit of a sentence. Pause now for more information. Another model which I think complements nicely Gagne's stuff is elaboration theory. Elaboration theory says each layer of instruction elaborates on a previous layer. So we would see it as very similar to the concept of a spiral model or a spiral curriculum. With elaboration theory, there's 8 stages instead of 9, or 8 ideas really. These aren't step-by-step stages. These are things that should occur in a lesson. First is that the course has and this is more of a macro consideration, that there is a single and simple organization in terms of the whole course. Next, that we start with simple ideas in the first lesson and then elaborate on that in subsequent lessons, so very much a spiral curriculum. Within each lesson, elaboration theory suggests to go from general ideas to more detailed, to go from more simple ideas to complex ideas, and to move from abstract concepts to concrete things. I would have a little bit of concern about moving from abstract to concrete. I think there are times when you should go from concrete to abstract. It's a debate worth having, though, whether you should do an example first and then theory, or theory first and an example. The fourth stage, summarizers, is where we review the content and represent the information in a rule, example, practice format. Then we might help the students understand where this new material fits into their overall picture by presenting maybe a concept diagram or a flowchart or decision tree or something like that to help them understand how it fits in to other things they know or other things they've done with you. We might use analogies to help students learn, particularly with a diverse group. We might use other strategies like cues, pictures, diagrams, mnemonics, again, acoustics, cognitive anchors that might help them learn the material more effectively. And elaboration theory, because it is of a time, it does recognize or require or wish that when instructional materials are designed, that there is some element of learner choice that they, can link to a different page or take control somewhat, make choices in a small way even, and that helps intrinsically motivate the learners effectively. So this is a conceptualization of elaboration theory and a representation of the different stages and how you might look at them, but it's only one. There's multiple understandings of elaboration theory, multiple models of the elaboration theory model. And another concept that goes effectively hand in hand, and I would say it's the third of the big three models. We've looked at the first two, is component display theory by David Merle. So before we look at component display theory, we'll look at his ideas on instructional design. So his model of first principles of instruction divides the teaching task into 5 stages: a task, activation, demonstration, application, and integration. And his take on those 5 stages are, if the task is a problem or something to solve, something that is real world related, something that moves from simple to complex, they're really effective kinds of lessons that can be learned. In terms of activation, linking it with existing knowledge and presenting the new knowledge as a growth and outgrowth of existing knowledge is considered good practice by Merrill. Getting the students to not only demonstrate the new knowledge to them, but play with it, explore it, evaluate it for themselves is good. Getting them then to apply it, again, if it's not necessarily real world problems, but simulations or faked up real world type problems that have some degree of verisimilitude, then that's great. And giving them guidance in terms of that, and then integrating the content to such a degree that they feel they own it and they can discuss it and debate it is great. So from that, we move on to component display theory that Merrill created, which is a 2-dimensional model, which is an x-axis and a y-axis. We have content. What are we teaching them? Are we teaching them facts, concepts, procedures, or principles? And then what do we want them to do with it? Do we want them simply to know them? Do we want them to use it? Or do we want them to activate it or use it practically? So typically we'd see a grid like this, where we have on the y-axis the type of content is it facts, concepts, procedures, and principles, and on the x-axis it's do we want them to remember, find, or use these things. And we normally say you can't really find a fact or use a fact, you can only remember a fact, because a fact is the basic unit of activity. But you can certainly use a concept or find a concept. You can certainly use or find a procedure, or use or find a principle. But you can remember facts, concepts, procedures, and principles. So here's an example in terms of language learning. If you want to take a pause here and have a look at that, great. That's a nice example of component display theory. Another model which slightly treads the boundary between macro and micro is the ICARE model, developed by Dick and Carey, or based on Dick and Carey's model. It says, when you're teaching a lesson, introduce the learners what need to be learned, present the content of the lesson, get them to apply what they've learned in practical activities, reflect on what's being learned by them, and extend the learning lesson by providing new resources online. So the original iCare model was a linear one, but they've changed it to iterative or cyclical, whereby the connect, they apply, and reflect are all iterative. There is a book by Clark and Meyer called E-Learning, the Science of Instruction, which looks at specific recipes or algorithms to help teach. It is very much from epistemologically from the point of view of the student as consumer of content, and I would see it as in a positive way of marketing the material in terms of presenting the content. So in terms of the book, there's a couple of things worth mentioning. They look at the psychology of multimedia in two aspects. One is in terms of how to deliver in terms of delivering the information, in terms of really how to design the system, and the other is how the brain takes in information. So information delivery theory and cognitive theory. And their take, based on Merrill a little bit, is that different types of information should be presented using different types of content. It's an interesting idea, I think. I don't think it applies all the time, but it's an effective recipe, I think, to get started. So they say, for example, if you're teaching facts, use a screen grab. If you're teaching concepts, use a static diagram. If you're teaching a process, use a simple animation. If you're teaching a procedure, use a more complicated animation. And if you're teaching a whole principle, use a much more detailed and growing kind of animation, sometimes interactive, they suggest as well, in terms of that. And I suppose another point they make that I think is very interesting is they talk about the difference between if I have text separate from a picture or integrated into a picture. And they debate whether it's better to have text as part of the picture or separate. What we know is it's different for different students. That's pretty much it. So that's the first part of this, and we'll see the next part in a minute. So thanks very much.